Anyone with achy knees or athletes with achy knees? Yeah, boy, man, isn't that the truth? Can't squat, hurts to squat. 100% of the people I see in the clinic with osteochondritis, flaking off, big osteochondral defects, chondromalacia, which is a softening of the articular surfaces. Usually a meniscus is involved unless it was a catastrophic injury, that's something that you couldn't control. Oftentimes all of these things, not oftentimes, let me back it up. I have never seen someone with a perfect squat also come in with all these horrors. All of these things are accompanied by people who are not squatting. They're knee bending. And you need to be clear. And so if your doctor says, don't squat, you're like, show me what your squat is. And they're going to always be in that muted hip position. They'll lead with the knees. They'll end up in this squat. Man, this hurts my knees just doing this for 1 second, right? And what you're going to see is always, if you start with what you know, with knee pain, you will be shocked at how much you can resolve. Because most of the time people will be like, hey, I'm having some knee pain. I went ahead and got it checked out, and the doctor said I have jumper's knee or some knee-itis. And they did an x-ray, yeah, and everything was okay, yeah, and they did an MRI, and everything was okay, great. And you know that there's nothing wrong with their knees. You've seen them work. Maybe they're overused a little bit. How did these conditions come to be? Improper mechanics, under load, over time. All tissues fail eventually. One of the reasons I needed to kind of explain that roll, slide, and glide is it will help you to understand what some of the precautions for some of the surgeries are, and also one of the mechanisms for resolving knee pain. The best way I know how to get people out of knee pain, literally, people would fly in from all over the world. Hey, I have this knee pain. I'm like, okay, let me see your squat. And it looks like this, or, I don't even know. I mean, I had literally like an elite world champion athlete. Show me your best squat, like you're going to squat. And he was like, is this my squat? And he's like, and he didn't know. And that's, whose fault is that? It's his coach's fault. That was his PE teacher's fault. No one ever taught him to squat right. The squat magically cures knee pain if you squat correctly. Magically. And so let's go back here and talk about magically curing knee pain. There's the best kind of CrossFit squat that we think achieves a nice balance of all these compromises. Feet roughly out wider than shoulders, turned out 7 to 30 degrees. Knees out of ankles, initiate movement with my butt going back, right? Knees break at the same time my butt breaks, right? It's not a good morning squat. It's okay for the knees to track forward as long as I have peak tension in my hamstrings, trying to maintain neutral spine the whole time. Every squat is a compromise. If I have a back problem, there are some in our Olympic lifting community who are like, man, keep the back upright at all costs. Burn the knees because the back's more important. And what do they mean? They're totally okay with knees being way under, much more muted hip position, right? But the back is straight and I'm receiving load with the back straight. Make sense? What if my knees don't tolerate that? That's a pretty heavy knee forward position. What happens with my knees respective to that roll, slide, and glide? So I've just tipped that tibia forward. I start to get a lot of potential shear across the front of that knee, right? That femur is not just rolling and sliding and gliding over a really vertical shin, but now that shin is tipped and all that movement happens and it creates potentially more shear. If I have the tolerance for it, that's fine. What about my kneecaps? Doesn't that potentially put a lot more strain on my patellar tendons? You bet it does. We talked about driving that knee through that static system, driving that bone, driving that shoulder through that statically loaded tendon, and boom, man, that is a case for really hot knees, potentially. Unless you ice your knees and you're stretching and you're keeping an eye on it. Everything is going to be a compromise a little bit. I can't get into that really vertical back position, so I choose to squat with the bar a little bit lower on my back. That's fine. And it turns me out a little bit, and I have to lean over a little bit, but I can tolerate that. So maybe, my squat has to be a little bit different because my knees won't take it forward a little bit. The very easiest, fastest way I found to solve people's squatting knee pain is the box squat. And I start them high. We build their confidence early. And if I get someone turned out into a good position And I'm not worried about a loaded back or anything yet, right? I tell them we got to keep the spine straight, which does what? Doesn't violate our midline stabilization principles. I don't overturn. I'm nice and neutral. I don't do a good morning squat, but I say stick your butt back, break your knees at the same time. That's fine. I'm not overextending. And I have them reach back. They can put their hands up to balance. Reach back. Slow pain. Hey, no pain. And they're like, wow, he squatted, no pain. And I'm like, look how vertical your shins are. Your shins are actually past vertical. And what we do with this nice box squat is we give people a chance to unload their quad tendons. It takes them off tension. We don't get a down-up stretch cycle. We're able to break that concentric, eccentric chain, and suddenly they can reset. I can get my back into a good position again. I rock forward, and I curl up. And it looks like just my bottom position. And what you'll notice is that my shin is pretty vertical and the femur is rotating about a pretty vertical tibia. Usually, when you see people who have any kinds of knee pain squatting, the second that knee comes forward, that's some kind of pain-generating mechanism. Maybe it's a bad meniscus, maybe it's tight joint, maybe it's inflamed fat pad, jumper's knee, it doesn't matter, arthritis. You put them into the best position where I get the best fit, maximum congruency of the joint, and I'm going to unload those hot spots, especially if they're used to working in a really bad range. So suddenly you put them into that ideal range, which goes back to our concept, best fit, translates back to best orthopedic function, and they're like, I'm squatting pain-free. And what you'll find is you'll probably really have to cue them to turn the knees out, butt goes back, and you know what? That's not the depth yet. But hey, I just had someone who's squatted for the first time pain-free in ages and ages and ages. So as I come forward, it's a really nice hip flexion moment, and my hamstrings get peeled straight up off the box. And what will end up happening is that people will not be able to keep that shin back. They will not be able to contract that hamstring from both sides. They do not have that capacity to be able to contract and extend the hip simultaneously, right? This is a mistake, right? That's not the squat we like. Everything achieves lago, boom, that's my jump. Hip extension, knee extension, about the same time, right? That dictates that I've got good control of these bad dogs. What we see time and time again is people do not have control. They have one control on one side and they don't have control over the other side. Ask them to stand back up and man, that knee comes forward. Wait a minute, that looked like Olympic lifting, didn't it? Right? Where I come back for a second and I chase forward. What's that about? Well, in that Olympic lifting position, my hamstrings are pretty muted, but I had to get underneath the load. So what you'll see is for a microsecond, you'll see that athlete put themselves into some hamstring function, and then they'll chase the load up, right? Is that our best squat for someone with knee pain? Negative. Right? Do I want a front squat like this in the real world? Right? Oh God, no, don't do that. Keep that thing loaded straight up and down. Create length between your elbows and your butt, but do not stick your butt out very far. Good enough to get your hamstrings involved. But that's why we start with what we know first. Body weight squat solves the squatting problem. Great, ma'am. You're squatting again. Ready? Hold this 10-pound plate to your chest. What? Where did this come from? And now, all right, just stick your butt back for the back of the chair. They all have a chair at home. These are your elderly patients with arthritis, right? These are your patients who have a history of knee pain and they cannot solve their knee pain. No one has been able to get them squatting into a position ever before without pain, and you are. You're keeping those shins vertical because we know that maximally unloads this patellar tendon. We get them aiming back, hamstrings are maximally fun, and then look, I get to do some good work here. And I'll put my hands right here and be like, don't let your knees come forward, boop. And they have to really extend and stand up. Does that make sense?